My name is Dr. Jan Garavaglia, Garavaglia.
May I proceed?
You may proceed.
Good morning, doctor.
Good morning.
How are you presently employed?
I'm the Chief Medical Examiner for Orange and Osceola counties.
And how long have you held that job?
I've been Chief Medical Examiner since 2004.
Prior to being the Chief Medical Examiner for District 9, where were you employed?
I was a deputy chief for a little less than a year, and then I was employed as a medical examiner in Bexar County, which is San Antonio, Texas, for 10 years, and prior to that, in the metropolitan Atlanta area. And I've been a medical examiner also in Jacksonville, Florida, and I trained as a medical examiner in Miami.
Okay. If you could just take us through your educational experience that led you to your work as a medical examiner.
Sure. I'm a MD, medical doctor. That degree was from St. Louis University in St. Louis, Missouri, graduating in 1982. I then did my internship in internal medicine at the university hospitals in St. Louis. I then specialized in pathology, both anatomic and clinical pathology. Anatomic pathology is basically the doctor at the hospital that looks under the microscope, does hospital autopsies, diagnoses diseases, and I'm board certified in that. That training was at the university hospitals in St. Louis. I'm also trained in clinical pathology. That is basically the doctor that runs the laboratories. I'm board certified in that. I then subspecialized in forensic pathology. That is the field of pathology that specializes in why people die suddenly and unexpectedly. It deals with ballistics through the body. It deals with injury interpretation. And that training was in Miami, 87 and 88, and I'm board certified in forensic pathology.
And after your educational experience, you became a medical examiner. You've told us where you've worked.
Yes, I just.
All right, taking us to today. Now, did you have occasion to become involved in the investigation of the death of Caylee Marie Anthony?
Yes, that came under under my jurisdiction.
Now, when did you first learn of the possibility that the remains of Caylee Anthony had been found?
That would have been on the 11th. I don't remember the time. Sometime in late morning, early afternoon.
Were you alerted by law enforcement?
I was alerted by my chief investigator, Steve Hansen.
Upon learning of that, what did you do?
I was late for the airport. I had already left the building, had run back in to pick up something that I'd forgotten. As I was walking out, Mr. Hansen told me that they had found the remains. And we weren't sure who that is for sure at that point. Oftentimes these scene recoveries take a long period of time. I had a engagement that I could not get out of. I was late for the airport, so I immediately contacted Dr. Utz and told him to initially handle it till I got back. I would be back the next day. I told Steve to make sure that Dr. Schultz was called. He's my anthropologist that's our consultant. And I believe I might have even talked to Dr. Schultz myself. I can't remember, but I made sure he was involved and I made sure Dr. Utz was able to handle it. I thought that initially, typically how we handle skeletal cases is that it takes a while for the recovery. They're brought in, they sit, and then we analyze, and it's a long process. I didn't think my absence for the night would matter.
Sure. Now, when you returned, you returned the following day?
Yes, that was Thursday. I returned Friday evening.
When you returned the following evening and for the days and weeks after that, did you go back and review the photographs that had been taken both at the scene prior to the skull's removal and those taken at your facility while you were gone? Have you reviewed all those photographs?
Absolutely.
Now, once you arrived back and took the case back from Dr. Utz, did you continue to investigate and photograph additional items that were taken with the body?
Yes, I did. Case was discussed. I went out to the scene. I reviewed all the photographs. I made some suggestions for what else needed to be done, and made sure that we got some other different other consultants in also.
Just a moment. If we may start by showing the witness State's Exhibit CX in evidence. CX. I think you might have to. It didn't really matter. Is one of the things that you examined when you arrived back the hair mat which was surrounding the skull?
Eventually, that hair mat came back to me. It was sent to the FBI, and I asked for that back.
All right.
And that was sent back to me, and I examined it then.
Is this a photograph that was taken before it was that you reviewed, or is this one that was taken after it came back?
Looks like there's bone. It's oftentimes when you show me one picture and it's not in context,
Sure.
It's difficult to say, but it looks like there's still bone attached. So,
Would this have been one of the photographs you reviewed?
oh, this would have been one that I reviewed, certainly.
All right. Let me go to photograph CY. Again, is this a photograph that you took or reviewed?
Yes.
All right. At this time, I'd move into evidence State's Exhibit CX and CY.
What says the defense? Be receiving evidence, the state's numbered.
CX will become state 250, CY will become state exhibit number 251.
Let's start with formerly CX. We published that to the jury.
Okay, published.
All right. Doctor, can you tell us what we're looking at in this photograph?
We're looking at the hair mat of the decedent of the case 81567.
What else do we see in the photograph other than hair?
We see a lot of the roots that have grown through the hair.
And now if we could see what was CY. And this is in evidence as 251. And again, what are we looking at here, Doctor?
We're also looking at the hair mat. We're also looking at the roots that have grown completely through the hair mat, and we're also looking at some holes. I don't know if you can. Holes in the hair mat, probably from insect activity.
Let's unpublish to the jury and move on to DA. You recognize this photograph?
Yes, that's a photograph that we teased out some of the hair to take as a sample. This was teased out from that hair mat to take as a sample for possible toxicologic use.
Right. And does this photograph also show a scale showing the length of the hair?
Yes.
This time we ought to move into evidence State's Exhibit DA.
It will be received in evidence, states numbered.
252.
You want to publish?
Yes, please. Again, the scale that you have here is to change my glasses, I'm sorry, 6-inch scale?
Yes.
All right, so this would reflect the length of the hair being at least more than 6 inches.
That is correct.
All right, thank you. All right. And we may unpublish, Judge. Yes, we're finished. I'm sorry, I said we may unpublish. Thank you. And if we could have DC in evidence. And you recognize this is one of the photographs taken either at your direction or by your office.
Yes, that was actually taken at my direction. Again, a hair, that's the scale next to one of the roots on the hair mat.
This is just, and the scale, the purpose of the scale is to allow someone to compare the size of the root with a scale in the same
Correct.
picture. This time, got to move into evidence, States Exhibit DC.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
253.
Publish.
Yes, please. That's fine, Your Honor, we can unpublish now. Now, some of the items that were found with the remains, did you examine and separately photograph a number of those?
Yes,
I want to specifically ask you about a blanket. You recall there being a baby blanket that was found,
yes,
right? And did you have that photographed?
yes,
This time, could we show the witness DV? Do you recognize this as a photograph of the blanket taken at your direction?
that was either taken at my direction or by someone in my staff. It's been photographed, it was photographed several times.
All right. This time, you ought to move into evidence, States Exhibit DV.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
254.
May we publish? This particular blanket, this is the condition that it came into your office. Is that correct? Hasn't been cleaned or anything like that? So.
It was not cleaned or it was just kind of unfolded.
Right. Are there certain portions of this blanket where you can detect some figures?
Yes,
Did you ask your staff to did they take a closer photograph to show those figures more clearly?
I might have even taken that photograph. I remember taking some, yes.
All right. If we could unpublish the jury, which I've done, and show the witness DW. And you recognize this photograph, DW?
Yes,
And is this the closer photograph trying to show the figures on the blanket?
yes, it is.
And this time, you ought to remove evidence, States Exhibit DW.
Any objections? Be received in evidence as states numbered.
255.
And may we publish?
Publish.
Now, I'm going to ask Mr. Perez to zoom in on this figure. When you viewed that figure, did it look familiar to you?
Yes,
Who's that?
Winnie the Pooh with Piglet on its back.
Thank you. We're all done with that photo. If we could show the witness DX. And is this a photograph of the other side of that blanket?
Yes, it is.
This time, you ought to move into evidence, States Exhibit DX.
What says defense? Be received in evidence as states numbered.
256.
And may I publish?
May.
Did that blanket have some plant material growing in it?
Yes,
And did you have that photographed as well to document the level of plant activity in the blanket?
yes, I did.
And unpublished to the jury, and if I may have DZ. Is that a photograph representing the amount of plant and root activity actually growing into the blanket?
Yes, it is.
State would move into evidence, States Exhibit DZ.
What says the defense?
DZ.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
257.
May I publish?
You may publish.
So just tell us what we're looking at here.
This is a close-up of the edge of the blanket, the one with the Winnie the Pooh with Piglet. And it shows vegetative material, roots growing on top of and through the blanket.
Thank you. We could go to E, show the witness EB, please. EB. Do you recognize this as an additional photograph of other areas of root growth in the blanket?
Yes.
Right. This time moved into evidence, State's Exhibit EB.
What says the defense? Be received in evidence the states numbered.
Okay, for the record, that's ED. I apologize. I said EB. I meant ED. Okay. And may we publish?
You may publish.
Now, if we could have EB as in boy. And you recognize this as another photograph of the root material.
Yes.
State removed evidence, State's Exhibit EB.
What says the defense? Be received in evidence the states numbered.
259.
And publish, please.
You may.
Again, we're looking at more root material in that blanket.
That is correct.
Unpublished to the jury. Unpublished. Could I have State's Exhibit EE? Do you recognize EE?
Yes, I do.
This is a photograph of more root material growing into the blanket. Is that
That's the
correct?
same blanket with showing root material growing into it.
State removed evidence, State's Exhibit EE.
Be received in evidence the states numbered.
260.
May I publish?
You may publish.
Was there also root material growing in the bag, that is the black plastic bag that was found with the remains?
There are two black plastic bags, and root material is growing through the holes in both those bags.
Let me show you, if we could show the witness EI. Does this photograph demonstrate the root material growing actually through the holes in the black plastic bag?
Yes.
This time, State removed evidence, State's Exhibit EI.
Be received in evidence the states numbered.
261.
May I publish?
You may publish.
Was there also a canvas laundry bag that was also found with the remains that you saw?
Yes, there was.
And were there roots growing within that item as well?
The canvas laundry bag was canvas on the outside and some type of kind of shiny vinyl type material on the inside, and it appears that the roots were just growing on top of and intricately applied to the canvas part of that bag.
If we may show the witness EN. And do you recognize that as a representative photograph showing the roots growing into the canvas bag?
Yes.
This time I move into evidence, State's Exhibit EN.
Be received the states numbered.
262.
May I publish?
You may publish.
Would it be fair to say that roots plant roots were growing in and around virtually everything that was retrieved from this scene, that is the immediate area of the skull?
No, I don't think we saw any roots in the shorts.
Okay.
There were certainly roots in bones, but that was further out. Roots through the bag, and then the shirt was completely disintegrated, so it's difficult to say. But certainly the blanket, the 2 plastic bags, and the canvas bag.
And you said the shirt was disintegrated. All that was left was the lettering and a collar?
The lettering and the stitching,
And the stitching.
along the hems, and with the tag.
In order to assist, and I'll just unpublish that, in order to assist in identifying the victim in this case, well, at the time that the bones were first found, how did you go about trying to identify who this child was?
Well, we thought the best identification was going to be through DNA. It's difficult to identify a child because oftentimes we'll use teeth or a dental comparison that was be difficult with this child because she's so young. And so we were hoping that we were going to get nuclear DNA, and then we knew that there would probably be at least mitochondrial DNA. So we thought the best way to go would be with the DNA.
And did your office send a bone off to the FBI laboratory for purposes of DNA identification?
Yes, we did.
Let me show the witness state's exhibit EO for identification. Do you recognize this as a photograph of the bone upon its return from the DNA evaluation?
Yes.
All right. This time, the auditor state would move into evidence state's exhibit EO.
What says the defense? Be received in evidence the states numbered.
763.
Yeah, publish. Doctor, the portion that's missing from this bone, is that a procedure you're familiar with in determining DNA identification from bone?
Yes, they have to remove a piece of the bone to test, so they removed a piece of that right tibia.
Now, did you receive results from the FBI DNA laboratory as to the identification of the remains?
Yes.
And did that laboratory identify the remains as that is Caylee Marie Anthony?
Yes, they did.
Now, as a medical examiner, is it your job to determine 2 things, one called cause of death and one called manner of death?
Yes, it's the fundamental, it's fundamental to my job, and that's basically why we exist as an office.
Is manner of death determination a purely medical or scientific determination?
Yes, the cause?
Manner of death.
The manner of death, it's based on scientific principles and ultimately gathering all the information you can about a case, all the circumstances of the case, all the history of the case, any medical history, knowing what the body showed, knowing all your ancillary tests. It's to take all of those things into consideration and any type of scientific information and to come up with an opinion as
Sorry.
Counsel, I don't need to go. Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're going to recess now for lunch. I'm going to ask you not to discuss this case among yourselves nor with anyone else. Any additional instructions on behalf of the state or the defense? Okay, we'll be in recess to 1:30. Okay, state recognized presence of jury.
Yes, sir.
And the defense. And members of the jury, did you heed all of my previous admonitions during the noontime lunch hour? Okay, Mr. Ashton, you may continue.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Dr. Garavaglia.
Good afternoon.
Let's start off by getting through a few housekeeping matters. I want to approach. Thank you. Let me show you some items that are marked for identification. First is State's Exhibit KL. You recognize that by your office's label as a bag that should contain the laundry bag that was found in evidence in this case.
Yes.
This time you take remove into evidence State's Exhibit KL.
What says the defense?
KL.
It will be received in evidence as states numbered.
264.
Let me show you what's been marked in evidence. State's Exhibit for identification KU. And ask you if you recognize that by markings as the bag that should contain the baby blanket photograph we saw earlier.
Yes.
This time, Your Honor, the State would move into evidence State's Exhibit KU for identification.
It will be received in evidence as states numbered.
265.
Next would be State's Exhibit KM. You recognize this as, by the markings of your office, as the container that should contain the body bag with the vegetation that was brought with the items.
Yes, I do.
This time, Your Honor, move into evidence State's Exhibit KM for identification.
It will be received in evidence as states numbered.
266.
Show you State's Exhibit KK for identification. Do you recognize that by the markings as a bag that should contain the tied black plastic bag that was brought in with the remains?
Yes, I do.
This time, Your Honor, State would move into evidence State's Exhibit KK.
It will be received as states numbered.
267.
Show you State's Exhibit KO for identification. Do you recognize that by the markings as a bag that should contain the untied plastic bag which found with the remains?
Yes.
This time, Your Honor, State will move to evidence. State's Exhibit KO.
No objection, Your Honor.
It will be received in evidence as states numbered.
268.
Let me show you what's been marked. State's Exhibit for identification KR, and ask you by the markings, that's the bag that should contain the shorts that we looked at in the photograph.
The shorts.
The shorts.
I didn't see the shorts in the photograph, I don't believe,
Oh.
but
The
those
shorts
are
that were
the
in the
shorts.
photographs. Let me stop. Did you review photographs of items that were taken and examined by Dr. Potts?
No, I examined those.
Those, okay, and they should be in there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. State will move to evidence State's Exhibit KR.
No objection.
Be received in evidence as states numbered.
269.
Let me show you State's Exhibit KT and ask you if by the markings that should be the bag containing the clothing, the letters, and the stitching.
Yes,
And those are things that were brought in with the body, is that correct?
that is correct.
State will move into evidence State's Exhibit KT.
What says the defense?
No objection.
It will be received in evidence as states numbered.
270.
Now let me show you State's Exhibit KS. If I may approach counsel just a moment. I believe by agreement of counsel, rather than have the doctor open this bag to see her markings, that it is agreed that this is the hair knot that was taken into evidence.
That's correct, Your Honor. I have no objection to reading it.
Okay, it'll be received as states number
271.
Right, that's all it is. All right. Dr. Neller, we've got the housekeeping out of the way. When we broke, we were discussing the concepts of cause and manner of death, and I believe you were explaining to the jury what manner of death means. Could you explain that, please?
The manner of death.
Manner of death.
The manner is the classification of death based on all of the information that is available to us, both scientific information, both scene information, both historic information, anything that will help us classify that death as to accident, natural, homicide, suicide, or undetermined.
And in assessing all that thing, the medical evidence, the scientific evidence, and the scene evidence, do you bring to bear your experience in forensic pathology?
Absolutely.
In this particular case, based upon everything that you have seen, the photographs, the skeleton itself, do you have an opinion as to the manner of death in this case?
Yes.
What is that opinion?
Homicide.
What do you base that on?
It's based on three main items. First, we know from observational studies, from experience, that it is a red flag that when a child is not reported immediately to authorities, either with an injury, that's something we look for foul play. This child, from history, was not reported for a long time. The other thing that makes it a homicide is that the body was hidden. A child's body is thrown out, hidden in a field. We know that is one of the things we look for when we are looking for a homicide. Also, it's often found that these bodies are in, not always, but closed containers, a suitcase or a plastic bag like this child was. That, again, is from our experience from observational systematic studies, a red flag for homicide. And the last, besides the delay, besides the being found in a field decomposed, would be the duct tape, somewhere located on the lower half of this face. There is no child that should have duct tape on its face when it dies. There is no reason to put duct tape on the face after they die. Based on our experience, we've seen that in cases of homicide.
Now, how does the concept of cause of death differ from the concept of manner of death?
Well, the cause of death is the injury or the disease that initiates the chain of events that ultimately results in the child dying or the person dying. So the cause is the specific injury or disease that ultimately causes the death.
In this case, based on the skeletal condition of the remains, can you render a medical conclusion on the cause of death?
The cause of death, what I put was homicide of undetermined means. I believe we can reliably say it's a homicide, but I don't know the means for which that homicide occurred.
Were there any objects found with the body that would have been capable of causing death?
Well, the only possible objects with the body, although I don't know if they cause death, and I'm not even speculating whether they cause death, would be duct tape. If that duct tape was over the mouth and nose, that's a possibility. Suffocation with a plastic bag would have been the only other thing I would have seen there.
Right. You are aware, are you not, of the evidence of chloroform being found during certain portions of the investigation of this case?
I was made aware of that, yes.
Could a child exposed to a sufficient amount of chloroform die as a result?
Absolutely.
But at this point, based upon the medical evidence, can you tell what caused her death?
No, I believe we have enough evidence, and I believe it's scientifically defensible to say it's a homicide, but I do not believe we have enough scientific information to say the means of how that homicide occurred.
Now, are there certain things that you can exclude? In other words, was there any trauma to the body that would
Well, the
connote-
trauma is very, their body is very decomposed. All I have is bone. So unless that trauma hurt the bones, I can't say. There's certainly, I've had other cases where there's been blunt trauma to the abdomen, and I can't say from the skeleton. So I can't rule out really any trauma, because sometimes even a gunshot wound would go through, and not touch the bone. So it's very difficult when the body is that decomposed to say why they died.
Now, in this case, was there any injury to the bones that would indicate trauma involving the bone?
There is no ante-mortem injury to the bones that would indicate the cause.
And were you made aware of any illnesses that the child suffered that could have caused death, anything of that
I
sort?
specifically asked for any history of illness or problems with this child, and I was told there were none.
No further questions. Thank you, Doctor.
Cross-examination?
How you doing?
Hello.
You okay?
I'm okay.
All right. Now, Dr. Garavaglia, you live in the Orlando area. Don't tell me where, but in the Orlando area.
Yes, yes, in the area.
Okay. And for the period of time of about 4 months prior to these remains being found, you were aware of all of the media attention surrounding this case, weren't you?
I was aware that this was a big case. I do not watch the news, and I listen to NPR, so I don't think I was as aware as most people. Certainly,
If you were wise enough to not necessarily rely on the news, you were aware that there was, in fact, a circus-like atmosphere around the Anthony home. Yes?
I don't know that.
Oh. Well, you knew it was, a lot of speculation and a lot of news about this case for months. Yes?
I did know that there was a lot of speculation about this case.
And you knew that if, unfortunately, remains were found of this child, that your office would be most likely involved.
No, I was hoping it was Lake County,
You were hoping it was Lake County, push it off to the west. Okay.
different jurisdiction.
Or so anywhere other than the 9th.
That's what I would have liked.
But in fact, you were called and you came back from wherever other business you were on to handle this case.
That's true.
And amongst the various things that you had known prior was news or references, as Mr. Ashton just referred to, regarding the potential of chloroform being involved in this case.
I was told that by investigations at the time we got the body.
You weren't told that the chloroform related to decomposition, but just that there was chloroform involved.
That there was a question of chloroform.
So you then reasoned that perhaps chloroform may have been used, in fact, to contribute to the cause of death of this child.
I think that would be one of the possibilities that we would have to examine.
So one of the things that you did in order to examine that possibility was to bring in an expert. Yes?
I brought in a toxicologist that I knew had dealt with toxicology of bones, which is,
Tough.
not a common thing.
And that toxicologist was a PhD, Dr. Bruce Goldberger from the University of Florida.
It was.
And you sent to him a piece of bone that had been resected from the humerus, was it?
The femur,
Pardon?
the left femur.
Left femur. We had a picture of it a while ago.
No, that was the tibia taken for the DNA. The
Well,
picture I saw.
Which part was sent to Dr. Goldberger so he could test for the presence of chloroform?
The piece of the left femur.
And as a toxicologist, the specific request was to look for chloroform and other what you call volatile chemicals. Is that right?
That is correct.
Meaning you were looking for chloroform and some form of poison.
Volatiles would have been alcohol, isopropanol.
Any kind of chemical that might have contributed to the cause of this child's death.
Yes.
And Dr. Goldberger, pursuant to your direction, submitted these samples to a myriad of toxicological examination tests, didn't he?
Not really a myriad. He only did checked for volatiles and several other tests. It was very limited what he can do with bone. But
Whatever tests were available that could be done, were done.
he tried.
And when they were done, the results were negative as to each and every one.
That is correct.
Now, in connection with this whole process, were you present when Dr. Werner Spitz came as a defense expert to want to observe the process?
Can we approach?
You may continue.
I may not be exactly verbatim, but I asked you if Dr. Werner Spitz came down to observe or participate in the autopsy.
Did he? No.
No? Were you aware of him coming down to want to watch your work?
Hearsay. Question to counsel.
Overruled.
I was informed by my office manager that Mr. Jose Baez had requested.
Objection, Your Honor. I don't believe that's what the court indicated counsel could ask.
He's already allowed me to ask the question. She's
Well-
just answering
Judge,
it.
we not.
Overruled. Go ahead and finish asking the question, Doctor.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Go ahead.
I was informed by my office manager there was a request by Jose Baez to bring an outside person in to watch the autopsy, and our policy in the autopsy is that we have a statutory duty to come up with the cause and manner of death. We would preserve everything possible then and make that available to him when we are finished.
Okay. And you told Mr. Ashton that in your determination of the manner of death, you consider all kinds of circumstances.
Yes, I do.
And in doing that, in this case, are you aware of whether or not Dr. Spitz, in fact, did a second autopsy?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
Okay. Now, I want to go back just briefly to Dr. Goldberger. I've been reminded that he's a medical doctor, isn't he?
No, he's not.
He's not?
Dr. Goldberger? He's a PhD.
Is he also a medical doctor?
Not to my knowledge.
All right. Well, what things do you know that he tested besides that piece of bone?
Let's see, for volatiles, he tested bone, the scrapings I took from the inside of the bone, the hair and soil that kind of fell out of the hair. And that was for volatiles. And then he tested the bone and then the scrapings from the bone marrow and washings we did from the cranial cavity. And he tested that for by gas chromatograph for prescription drugs, illicit drugs. And then he tested specifically for alprazolam in the bone, the scrapings of the bone cavity, the washings of the cranial cavity were all then specifically tested for alprazolam.
And alprazolam, what's a more common name?
It's a benzodiazepam, also known as Xanax.
Xanax.
Yes,
So he tested for all those things, and all the results were negative.
that is correct.
And speaking of the cranial wash you did not cut open the cranium, did you?
No, absolutely not.
Now, you told Mr. Ashton also that there was no trauma found in your examination, correct?
No antemortem trauma, meaning prior to death. We found some postmortem trauma from animals chewing on bones, and
You found the postmortem trauma. The anthropologist confirmed to you that there was indication of animal activity, right?
oh, you could say that.
Okay.
That was part of my examination.
But anything that happened before, there's no evidence of any form of trauma before when this child was alive, is there?
On the bones, there was no evidence of trauma.
And in your exploring all the world of circumstances about this, you didn't find about any trauma either, did you?
No, I did not.
So if I understand your testimony, you, the long and the short of it is, are confirming that despite the investigations, the toxicology, the anthropologists, all of these things, there is no scientific or medical evidence to establish the cause of this child's death. Is that correct?
The means of the homicide could not be determined.
And you determined to call it a homicide as opposed to an accident or indeterminate.
The circumstances of death and did not fit anything but a homicide.
The circumstances.
That's the way the body was found.
Okay.
And not
I know
reporting
that.
the body.
And also what Detective Melich told you.
I'm not, what part did Dr. Melich tell me? The
What-
part that the body wasn't reported for 31 days was what
You
he told me.
learned these things from Yuri Melich, an investigator.
That's our standard
some of the
course
things-
of business.
Some of the things you learned from the media.
From you?
Media
Oh, media. No, nothing from media would have been entered into my decision.
didn't enter your mind.
Well, I can't take anything that the media would say into a decision as grave as this.
So the bottom line is, when you say, and you place the label homicide, the indeterminate means, you're saying that circumstantial evidence to you says that it probably was a homicide.
Not probably. I think that is the only logical conclusion based scientifically on some of the scientific information we have, based on observational information we have about homicides and children dying.
What is the scientific information, the circumstance?
Well, we know, and of course, you know, systematic observational studies are part of science. That's a big part of forensic. It's a big part of how we know our world. We look at all the accidental drownings, for instance, in my jurisdiction. We systematically went through those. 100% EMS is called immediately when the child is found.
Well, that has nothing to do with
Oh,
this case, does it, Doctor?
Oh, no.
Objection argumentative.
Sustain.
Okay.
Go ahead, Doctor.
It absolutely has something to do with this case. Every death I investigate has to put into the circumstances of death. You can never, ever determine a manner of death, except in very rare instances, just on examining the body. And so it always has to. So we need to know how usually deaths occur. So we have to know, and there's scientific studies in peer-reviewed literature
now
about
I'm
some of the
gonna object to
red
the bolstering
flags
she's trying to do
for
right now.
homicide.
Objection to the bolstering. She's now talking about studies. We don't have them.
Overruled.
So by my experience and by what is known about the way homicides occur, I felt that the preponderance of evidence and that there was no other logical conclusion could be found by not reporting a child for 30, who has a legal, moral, and ethical obligation to care for a child, not reporting that child missing. The fact that it's tossed in a field to rot in bags is a clear indication that the body was trying to be hidden. Those are, even it being put in a bag is a very big red flag for homicide, and never seen in an accidental death of a child. And the fact that there's duct tape anywhere attached to that child's face is, to me, indication of a homicide.
Okay, now let's back up. What about your circumstantial observations and deductions is scientific, ma'am?
The fact that we know 100% of the time that accidental deaths are reported unless there is a good reason not to be. We know that there is no reason not to report. In fact, if you do not report an injury to authorities, you are risking that child's life. So we know that's partly behavioral science. And we know in all of the cases that come through our morgue that accidents are 100%, particularly on children, are reported unless there is a good reason not to.
So you're trying to tell this jury 100% that there's no way that this death could have been accidental?
No, I said 100% of the time, let's say on a systematic review of drownings, it's one of the more common accidents, 100% of the time when the person finds the child, they call 911 because there is a chance that that child might live. They need to report that and give them a chance.
And what if a person finds an obviously drowned body that's so obviously deceased? What then? Is there some scientific thing to your conclusion about their morality?
No, but I'm looking at the behavior as a systematic observational information that shows that no matter how stiff that body is, they always call 911 on the hopes that that child could be saved. I'm looking at observational data on that kind of death. That's what we use.
So you're saying then, by your determination, the circumstantial evidence is that's what causes you to conclude it must have been a homicide because you can't explain it any other way.
I explained to you the red flags that we know in forensics
First of all, Doctor,
based on behavioral science.
You need to answer my question.
I don't understand.
Your Honor?
Objection to counsel.
Just a second, folks. Mr. Ashton, objection.
Objection to counsel instructing the witness. That's for
To-
the court.
I'd ask the court to instruct her to answer my question. The question I asked her to call for a yes or no answer.
Please repeat the question.
Objection sustained, Mr. Basin. The question did not call for a yes or no answer. It was sort of open-ended. So if you want a yes or no answer,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last word.
okay. All right. Doctor, did you finish answering the question?
I don't even know what the question was.
See?
Okay, then let's have a new question.
I don't even remember. The bottom line is, let's just take it and make it simple. Cause of death, you don't know. Manner of death, you say, based on the circumstantial evidence, you conclude that it was a homicide for the reasons you told us.
I felt that the manner of death, although the cause of death is homicide by undetermined means, I felt the means were unable to be substantiated scientifically. I felt the manner of death was defensible scientifically based on systematic observational studies.
Okay. Of observational studies of other things, other cases.
Of homicide, how homicides occur, how accidents occur, how natural deaths occur, yes.
Other cases.
Other cases.
Okay. Now, by the way, if these remains had been found 4 or 5 months before, would you have had better chance at scientific evidence?
Absolutely.
And incidentally, you said something about duct tape. Isn't it true from what you observed and saw, if there was any duct tape, it was only in the vicinity of the lower mandible?
That's correct.
I have just a minute, Your Honor.
You may.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I have no further questions.
Any redirect? Sir. You may proceed.
Doctor, Mr. Mason asked you about your knowledge of the defense's desire to do a second autopsy of the body.
Yes.
Did you attempt to keep the body in exactly the same condition it was when you received it?
Yes, we did, except for what we had to take for a DNA and for the possible toxicologic testing.
You left the roots in the bones just as you found them?
Yes.
And
In
left
fact,
the-
we packaged it nicely so they could keep the anatomic groups together.
And you left the skull intact just as you had found it?
Yes, that's normal procedure for an anthropologic exam, is to keep that intact.
Now, the absence of positive results for chloroform or other substances, does that, as a matter medically, exclude the acute use of those substances at or near the time of death?
Right. We would not expect to find any of those things positive in a bones. That was a long shot trying to check for those, but I thought we would be amiss not to at least try. We would not expect any of those to be positive in a set of bones, even if they were positive at the time of death, even if it was present.
Taking, for the purposes of my question, for the following hypothetical, the following facts. Assume that Caylee Anthony died and was discarded on or about June 16th of 2008, approximately 6 months before the body was found.
Yes.
At the stage that Mr. Mason was asking you about 4 months earlier, which would have been August, so the body's been out for 2 months. What would be the body's condition after 2 months?
Oh, well, it would probably be skeletonized. Certainly would be skeletonized by then.
So if the body had been found in, let's see, August, would you expect that it would have been skeletonized with very little soft tissue?
Yes, I would expect it to be skeletonized.
Would you expect the internal organs to be completely?
Completely gone.
Thank you. No further questions.
Recross as to those issues. Okay, doctor, you may be excused.